Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org with a video tutorial for the new Boston. In this tutorial we are going to look at submitting forms without a submit button. So we're essentially going to be using jQuery to allow us to submit a form on a particular action. So why is this useful? Well, first of all, it works really well with select fields with different options inside. So for example, when you have something like select, and then you have options inside, let's just go ahead and put option 1, and we'll copy and paste this, and option 2. You'll see that we've got obviously an option thing here. If we were to go ahead and say select option 1 or option 2, and we had, say, a default option here, so choose. If we were to go ahead and select option 1, that would be an event change, so we could apply the event change to that and submit a form that might be around it. It also works really well with input fields with the type file. So when you're using file selection, if I was to go ahead and say pick tartan.jpg here, that is classed as a change of element, and therefore we could go ahead and submit the form that was associated with it, and there'd be no need to have a submit button. So it basically, gives your user the chance to go ahead and quickly submit content. So we're going to be looking at it with regards to both elements, the file and the select element. The select element is slightly different because what we want to do is we want to make sure that it doesn't equal the default value. Remember here we had a default value of choose. We would need to match it against that and make sure that we didn't submit a form if it was to equal this. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and look at is submitting the file without having to click a button. So we'll go ahead and just build a form as we usually would with a file. So we have an action. I'm just going to set this to file.php. The method I'm going to go ahead and set to post, and the enc type needs to be multi-part form data. That's just how we submit files, so it's not really relevant to the tutorial, but it's there and it's done with. So we've now got a form on our page. We don't need to go ahead and give it an ID or a class or anything like that, because we're going to be using the parent traversing function in jQuery, and this is going to select the parent element, which in this case anything inside here would be the form. So if that doesn't make sense, you'll see how it works a bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and create an input type of file. You'd obviously give this a name or something like that, but it's not really relevant in this case. So we've now got a file, so we can choose a file here, choose a file from our computer, and that would be changed. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and bind an event handler onto this input type here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all input fields with the type file rather than this particular one. So obviously you could go ahead and type ID equals file. I'll just put a long name just as an example. File to be a file to have form submitted, blah 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 blah, something like that, but you know what I mean. But in this case we're just going to use a jQuery selector for all types, all input fields with a type file. So you'll notice that I've included obviously jQuery.js on my page. This is just the latest version of jQuery, and then I've got my external JavaScript file, which is ext.js. And inside that ext.js, obviously nothing's happening at the moment. We're going to go ahead and write the code. So the first stage here is to select any element on the page with the type file, obviously being an input field. So we'll go ahead and just set up our document. We use document.ready to wait for the, and inside of this ready event handler we want to go ahead and run a particular function. So when our document's ready, we can run everything inside of here. So let's go ahead and obviously first of all select this particular element, or all elements on the page that match this. So I'm going to go ahead and use the selector input, but this time I'm going to, or for this in this particular case, I'm going to specify a type, and that's file. So what we can do is we can now go ahead and append on this change event handler. So once the element has changed in itself, so this value has been added, so when we, for example, when we select tartan, the value of this element will have changed. So once we've changed, we want to go ahead and run a function. And what's going to happen now is we're just going to alert out changed, so we know that this is working. Let's go ahead and refresh and click on on a file, and you can see that we've got this dialog changed here. That means that we've successfully tracked the event once it's changed. But now what we want to do is we want to obviously submit this form. Now, because this is a parent element of this input element, what we can do is we can use traversing in jQuery to select the parent element. So we can go ahead and say this, what that we usually use to select the element that we have already selected, and we're going to say parent, so dot parent and then brackets, and then we want to go ahead and just say submit. So now that that's happened, what's going to happen is when any particular input file has changed, or input type or input field with the type file has changed, the form around it will always be its parent. So what's going to happen is the parent here is going to be submitted, and that's going to obviously be submitted to file.php. It will just submit this form as we usually would with a submit button. So let's go ahead and refresh the page.